The Expanse is a Hugo Award-winning series of sci-fi novels as well as novellas and short stories. It was also adapted for TV by the Sci-Fi Network and was later picked up by the Amazon Prime Video studio. And in today's video, I want to take a look at the books and the TV series and answer the question of which one was better? What's up, readers? I'm Adam, aka A Dude Who Reads, and today I want to talk to you about The Expanse. The Expanse was one of my favorite sci-fi series of all time. I started watching this series a few years ago when it first came out, when it was on the Sci-Fi Network, and I was pleasantly surprised. I hadn't watched a sci-fi series that had kept my attention for this long in a really long time. And when I found out that it was adapted from a series of novels, obviously I had to jump in to find those novels. And lo and behold, the novels were excellent as well. Now, the TV series and the novels are both excellent pieces of literature and TV. The question that I'm trying to answer in this video is which one of the two is better? And this is a lot harder to answer for this series than it is for most of the other series that I've read, in which case you really don't have that much of a debate. But in the case of The Expanse, there's a case to be made that either one of these two formats is better for this series. So to help me make this decision, I've decided that I'm going to evaluate both the book series and the TV series along a few different categories. The first category that I'm going to look at is characters. So we'll look at the characters in each. Then we will look at, I'm going to check my notes because this is hard for me to remember. We're going to look at story and plot. We'll look at the pacing. Then we will look at the setting and or world building. And then we will look at the entertainment value before finally announcing the winner. So if you want to spoil the fun, you can take a look at the timestamps below and figure it out. But if not, let's go through these one at a time and see which one of these series is better in each of these categories, and see if we can ultimately determine which one is the better use of your time or the more entertaining. Let's go. Starting with the characters. So the characters of the Expanse series are they're a little bit of a mixed bag. For me, as a reader, generally speaking, characters are the thing that I look for first and foremost in my books. If I can connect with characters, then generally speaking, I'm going to have a good time reading a book. To me, characters tend to be more important than plot or story or any of those other things. The Expanse novels, the characters are good, but while some characters are interesting, other characters are slightly less so. And so on the whole, characters are not the thing that shine the most in the Expanse novels. So, to take a few characters specifically, there's some really great characters in the novels, like Christian Avasarala, who is just this fantastic over-the-top character, this Indian grandmother who has this sort of bureaucrat's role on Earth, and she swears like a sailor, is incredibly intelligent, is always 2 steps ahead of everyone, and just a super entertaining character to spend time with. Other characters that I really enjoyed from the novels, Amos Burton, the mechanic on the Rocinante, part of the main cast of protagonists. To me, just one of the more interesting characters in modern sci-fi. You don't get a ton of Amos in a lot of the books, so the books are often written from this limited third-person POV, where the characters who we're following are the ones we get to know the most of, and there's very little following Amos around, but there's a good reason for that, and that's because Amos is unusual. He's essentially the answer to the question of what would happen if you had someone who had no moral compass whatsoever, but who attached himself onto a person so that he could outsource his conscience. And that's kind of who Amos is as a character. And so you don't really get to see what's going on in his head because it would probably be a little bit too weird. But Amos as a character is super fascinating, super fun to read about. And the other character who grew on me over the course of the series was Jim Holden, the sort of main protagonist for the series, who I've talked about this a little bit in other videos. But Jim Holden is a character who is the quintessential good guy. He's got a strong conviction of what is right and what is wrong. He is always striving to do the right thing. He's got this sort of altruistic tendency, kind of this overbearing Boy Scout sort of attitude to him. So he's the kind of character who, honestly, in most types of fiction would just kind of get on my nerves because he's too much of a goody-goody. But what makes Holden interesting is the way that he is written in The Expanse, in that Corey acknowledges that Holden is over the top good, and so he showcases some of the downsides to that, and he shows how this makes him sort of inflexible and how it makes him sort of naive in certain instances, and it makes him not see things that other people can see very clearly. And putting all that together, you kind of end up with a character who shouldn't be all that interesting, but ends up being really fascinating to follow. But just as you have really interesting characters to follow, on the flip side in the novels, there are other characters who, frankly, I don't feel like get fleshed out all that well. And so they're just kind of there. They serve their purpose, they advance the plot, but they're no more than that. With the TV series, you kind of have the best of both worlds. All the characters who are written really well in the novels get portrayed excellently in the TV series. Avasarala is fantastic. Jim Holden is a great character. Wes Chatham does a great job with portraying Amos Burton. But in addition to that, you have really great performances. So Dominique Tipper, who plays Naomi Nagata, takes a character who in the novels, frankly, doesn't have all that much depth to her, in my opinion, despite the fact that she has some really deep storylines. And she portrays her in such a way that's really compelling. The same with Bobby Draper's character in the TV series. So when you put all this stuff together, if I have to sort of give a point to one or the other, in this case, my point goes to the TV series, which does a better job of portraying the characters than the novels. The second category we're going to look at is the story or the plot. And in this case, I think it's really important to note that the showrunners for the Expanse TV series are actually the authors of the novels. And so they are the ones who did the majority of the writing for the TV series, and they kept the TV series as faithful to the novels as was probably humanly possible and still makes sense as a TV series. So in the first few seasons of the TV series, the story is so closely connected to the novels that if you watch the TV series first and then read the novels, there is very little that is going to surprise you, to the point where it almost makes reading the novels boring if you've watched the TV series first. The only changes are things like there's certain characters that get combined so that you don't end up with a giant cast of characters, some of whom only show up for like an episode and disappear. Or there's some characters who only appear in later novels but who get pulled closer into the story, so you get to know them a little bit more before their main plot develops later on in the story. But aside from that, the adaptation is super, super faithful. And so you would think it would make calling which is better, the TV series or the novels, better from a story perspective almost impossible, since the stories are so close together. And that would be true, except for the fact that the TV series ended after 6 seasons. And so because of that, the first 4.5 seasons are incredibly faithful to the novels, and then about halfway through season 5 and into season 6, you start getting some pretty significant departures, because it becomes clear at that point that the writers are trying to wrap up this story. And whereas books 5 and 6 in the novels are really kind of an inflection point where the story takes a different turn and kind of takes us in a very different direction, in the TV series, seasons 5 and season 6 start to wrap up the story. And the way that the story is wrapped up in the TV series, for the most part, is quite satisfying. But you can tell that there was still the hope that maybe this series would go longer than 6 seasons, and so you're left with a few dangling plot threads that you don't really know what to do with. In the novels, those plot threads basically become the basis of the last 3 novels in the series, and that last 3 novels in the series are probably my favorite books in the entire series. And so in this case, if we have to choose between the TV series and the novels, I'm going to give the point here to the novels, solely for the reason that they went on for longer and they had an opportunity to tell some much bigger stories that the TV series just didn't have the opportunity to get into. Next up, in terms of things that we're going to compare, we're going to talk about the pacing. The pacing of the books versus the pacing of the TV series. Now, to me, pacing when it comes to storytelling is super important. I approach literature and I approach any kind of entertainment from sort of the perspective of someone who learned writing as a craft. And so one of the things you learn when you learn storytelling is to pace your story, and good pacing can make or break a story, whether it be a written story or a visual story. And in the case of The Expanse, the pacing between the TV series and the novels is slightly different. And you can understand this because in the novels, you obviously have a lot more flexibility, right? You can have longer books, longer chapters, shorter chapters. You can have characters appear and disappear. So the TV series is still limited because of the format. You still have a certain number of episodes to tell the story in. The episodes can only be a certain length. And so it locks you in a little bit. As a result, the pacing in the TV series at times is, there's a few instances in the TV series where the pacing just feels a little bit off. Certain things go on for longer than you would expect, whereas other things get wrapped up a little bit too quickly. And honestly, this is really, really minor, and I'm not even sure I would have noticed this if I hadn't also read the books. But because of that added flexibility in the novels, the pacing in the novels just seems to work a little bit better, and I think Corey does a really great job with pacing out his stories, and I think it's one of his I'm going to say his, even though Corey is two people, his or their fortes as writers. Whereas the TV series does most of it really, really well, but there are a few instances where you can tell they're brushing up against the limits of the format. The fourth area where we are going to dive in here is the setting or the world building. And this is not something that I would necessarily include when evaluating most pieces of fiction or most stories. In a world like The Expanse, where the setting becomes a character unto itself and the solar system becomes such an integral part of the story, I think you need to talk about world building and the setting. And so between the books and the TV series here, I think there's a very, very fine line, with Corey doing an excellent job in the books of establishing the solar system, how big and vast this sort of, when we normally in sci-fi, when you think of sci-fi stories, you have sci-fi stories being told across entire galaxies. And so, you know, people are jumping between different solar systems and different planets like it's nothing, and they're basically doing it as if they're going around the block. Whereas Corey does a really great job of establishing just how vast and how huge the space is, right? So even in our own solar system, which is, you know, our own little neighborhood, the space between Earth and the moon, and between Earth and Mars, and between Mars and the rest of the solar system, how vast those spaces are, and just how far apart things are, and things like how light delay becomes this incredible limiting factor with how you communicate with people. I think Corey does an absolutely masterful job of that, and does a really great job in the books. And yet, in the TV series, I think they kick this up at even a higher notch, because in the TV series you have all of the benefits of what's happening in the books, but on top of that you have the added visuals, which they do an excellent job of the types of technology that's involved in creating this world that is, yes, sci-fi, but sci-fi almost in a way that would be quasi-realistic, and using, you know, more realistic forms of physics than what you would find in a Star Trek or a Star Wars or that kind of thing. And the impressive nature of these ships that they are traveling on, and the vastness of the space that they're communicating on. The other thing the TV series does a really great job of is showing what life on Earth would look like, and how the Earth has evolved to accommodate, you know, now 20 billion people at this point. And I think that cannot be ignored. And so while the novels do an excellent job of world building and of establishing the setting, the visuals in the TV series are just absolutely perfect for what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that is a fantastic view of what a sci-fi series should be able to do. So in the case of world building and of setting, I'm giving the point for this one to the TV series. All right, so the last category we're going to talk about is entertainment value. And entertainment value, I am just going to define as what is the most fun to consume as a piece of entertainment. Now, obviously, if you're not a big reader, the idea of reading 9 relatively thick books is not going to be particularly appealing to you and not going to be entertaining. And so obviously you'll prefer the entertainment value of the TV series. But I'm going to try and look at this from the perspective of someone who enjoys both reading and watching television and trying to determine which one of these two is the most entertaining. So if I look at it from the perspective of the books first, the books are just a really great, enjoyable read. It's light reading. There are certain aspects and certain themes to the books which will make you reflect a little bit and will cause you to ask yourself some hard questions if you want to go that route. If you just kind of want to switch your brain off and enjoy a good story, you can also do that with these books really, really easily. If I turn my attention to the TV series is just a whole lot of fun. I mean, it is 6 seasons, 6 short seasons of really quality television. There's probably only one other sci-fi series I can think of that I would ever even consider rewatching from beginning to end, but The Expanse is one that I've actually already done that with. I've watched every single season twice, and I think it's just a really great show, and it's a lot of fun. And so, TV series, excellent in terms of entertainment value. The books, also excellent in terms of entertainment value. So for this one, I'm going to have to say it's a tie. Now, if I look at our score, we've got 3 for the books, 3 for the TV series. Therefore, I have to declare a winner. I'm not going to call it a tie. I'm gonna come up with the tiebreaker here. So the tiebreaker for this is going to be, and maybe this is going to be just as much of a cop-out as making it a tie, but for me, the tiebreaker here is whichever one of these 2 formats you consumed first is going to be the winner for you. And so in my case, I watched the TV series before I read the books, and so I'm giving my tiebreaker vote to the Expanse TV series, which edges out the books for me, even though the books have a lot of great things going for them. Now, what does that mean for you? If you were to read the novels first and then watch the TV series, I would expect that you would prefer the novels. And if you're someone who has not touched either of them yet, my suggestion to you, if you are open to doing both, is read the novels first and then watch the TV series, if only because you will enjoy reading the novels and you'll enjoy the stories of those first 4 novels a lot. And then when you watch the TV series for the first time, you will still get something out of that TV series because, like I said, there's additional layers on top of what's in the books in terms of the visuals and all that fun stuff. If you were to watch the TV series first and then read the novels like I did, the first 4 books in the series will feel a little bit, I won't say boring, but it will feel a little bit repetitive. It will feel like you've seen this all before, and it will lose a certain amount of its punch. So if you're just coming to the Expanse series now, and this is your first time in this universe, my suggestion, read the books, then watch the TV series if you are willing to do both. If you're not willing to do both, the TV series is a fantastic series and stands up on its own as an excellent piece of television. So that is my decision. That is how this breaks down for me. That is my final winner. TV series wins based on the fact that I watched it first. Hope you guys didn't think that was too much of a cop-out, but maybe it was. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments below. Have you seen the series? Did you read the books? Which one did you prefer? What did you like? What did you dislike? Let's chat about it down in the comments below. And until next time, happy reading. Cheers.